Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Maria and I make personal development content here on YouTube. And on today's video, I wanted to get on here and I wanted to talk about how to combat anxiety as a Christian. And I think that this is something that we, as humans in general, suffer with anxiety. We are always trying to figure out like the future and trying to be prepared for the future and try to predict the future. But there are honestly no way for us to be able to do that because we are not God. And so that's really where I wanted to come on here today and talk about, because this is something that I am constantly combating. And I really wanted to provide 3 tips that I have found that has really helped me and really worked for me. And I should say works for me. And so, yeah, I really hope these tips are helpful. Other thing I want to just quickly say is my voice, as you can hear, as you could probably tell, is not sounding the way it usually does. And that's just simply because I'm a little bit under the weather. But I just wanted to get on here and share these tips. So the first way that I combat anxiety as a Christian is realizing that typically when I start to feel like these intrusive thoughts, or when I start to feel or experience these like scary thoughts, like things that are just like either like so far-fetched from happening, or like just really just feel like all these bad and negative things are going to happen, that is typically when I start to realize that I am starting to experience some anxiety. And when I start to experience that anxiety, I realize that honestly, I am not putting my eyes on Jesus at all. In fact, I'm putting my eyes on myself and my own limitations and my own capabilities. And so when I do that, and when I'm honest with myself, I can say, okay, the reason why I'm experiencing so much anxiety is because I think that I'm in control of the situation. Like, I think that there is something that I can be doing differently. I think that there is something that I can be doing. And so it's just up to me. And then when I start to like see like, oh wow, like actually there is nothing I could do about this situation, because God will then put us in those positions where we start to notice there really is nothing for us to do but just sit still. And I realized that, like I said, tip number 1 is to focus my attention solely on God, to give it solely to God, to pray to God, to talk to Him. I cannot emphasize how important it is to know that if it matters to you, it matters to God. And so when you know that, in just like in the Bible, it says all things, you can come to Him and pray about all things. And that's in Philippians. All things. That does not mean like this thing or that thing. That means all things. Anything that matters to you matters to God. Just as simple as a parking spot. Like, if you need a parking spot when you pull up to a place and you're like, Lord, please just give me this parking spot, you can pray to God about that. And I think sometimes we think that like, oh, like there are certain things we can give to God because they're like more complex things, but the things that we feel like we should be able to handle on our own as humans, that is like where we fail to pray to God about. And that's usually the things that we need to pray to Him about more than anything, because those are the things that we are trying to control with our own limitations. See, our mind can't do what God can do. That's just not it. Like, we are humans. We have limitations. They're like, we are not omnipresent. We are not like, we cannot see the future. We cannot even fathom. This is what it is about God. Like, this is what makes God God, is that He does the impossible. And so when we try to put our own personal limitations on what God can do, that is where we start to realize, okay, this is where our anxiety is coming from. So it's time to direct our attention back to God. The second thing is prayer. Sorry, not prayer. The second thing is scripture. So when it comes to scripture, look up, do some research on scriptures that help you with anxiety. So you can do a Google search. Scriptures for anxiety, scriptures for anxious times in life, scriptures to calm your mind when you're feeling anxious. You can try different variations of things on Google and you will find different scriptures that will help you. And then honestly, you can even take it a step further and go straight to the Bible app. And on the Bible app, they have different subjects. Like they have love, they have passion, they have fear, they have anxiety, they have all these, they have hope, they have all these different categories. And you can click on them and they will show you in there different scriptures that speak exactly to what it is that you are struggling with at that time, or what it is that you need encouragement with. And so when you read those scriptures and you have those scriptures, you can paint them on your heart. And so you can even take it a step further with the scripture where you make note cards, right? You can make a note card of anxiety scripture and write different scriptures on there so that when you are starting to feel anxious, you can remind yourself of what God has told us already. Like God has told us no good thing will he withhold from us. Like he will give us the desires of our hearts. Like today has enough problems of its own, and this is why we must focus in on today and today's problems only, because we do not know what can happen tomorrow. All of these type of scriptures are things that you can reiterate to yourself. Put post-it notes around your house if you need to, at your desk at work if you need to remind yourself constantly. Make a set an alarm on your phone that reminds you, like a scripture of anxiety, like a certain time in the day. Whatever you need to do to remind yourself of that scripture to the point where you have it almost memorized in your mind, so that when you start to feel a way, you feel comforted. You feel comforted reiterating that scripture right back to God. Like, God, nope, I'm not even going to worry about this, because you know what? There is nothing that I can do about this, and I'm going to reiterate your scriptures to me, God, because your word is the bottom line. Your word is the book of life. So anything that you say in there, you are not a man that you should lie. And that leads me to my third tip. My third tip is learning to release control. If you are not really familiar, or if it's something that you haven't really like kind of connected, anxiety is from the desire to control circumstances in the future. And when you try to predict the future, you're always going to be disappointed, because the future, our plans are not God's plans. And so when it comes to that, the biggest thing that I always like to say is learning to release control and understanding that there is nothing we can do. Just like the scripture says, like today has enough problems of its own. So when you want to be so concerned about the future, you are escaping something that you can be doing right now. You are escaping something that you should be sitting in right now. So I know for me personally, right, something that I really struggle with when it comes to anxiety is like thinking that like the circumstance that I'm in right now is going to predict or change something that I want to see. So for instance, like one of the things that I always try to remind myself in scripture is that God will give us all the desires of our heart, right? And so no good thing will he withhold from us. But it's like, okay, God, yeah, I know that. Like, I know that. And those things are great. And those things are important to know. And those things are great reminders. But then you also have to then do your part in releasing that control once you reiterate those things to yourself. And so I have a tendency to be like, oh, well, this is what I see right now, and I can't really see anything changing from this. And this is why God says again, we can only see a little small portion of what is really the bigger picture that God has for us. And so this is why We must relinquish that control and remember that God is in control. There is nothing that we can do to change our circumstance. We have to have faith. Like, that is the point of faith, is to focus on the things that we can control. And so in those moments when we are so busy trying to escape something else because we keep thinking about the future and it's not third, what are you missing right here in this moment? What lesson are you missing right here in this moment that you're so anxious about the future that you're not focusing on the present? And that is a part of trying to skip the developmental process, because when we are so anxious and we are trying to control the future and control our lives and control and use our own will instead of God's will, we are missing the very thing that God is trying to communicate to us. And so when we learn to release that control, because at the end of the day, God is allowing us to go through this thing to teach us something. We are uncomfortable about something, which is why we are trying to rush the process along, which is why we are trying to think about the future, which is why we have anxiety. But if we just sit in the uncomfortability of it all and understand that God is allowing us to go through this process and release control because we can't see what He can see, that is how we learn to combat anxiety as a Christian. And so that is really it for me. I wanted to come on here and I really wanted to talk about this because I feel like this is so important to really like get into, because a lot of us as Christians, we experience this often. Like, this is not something that's like weird or like something that's like out of the ordinary. No, all Christians, all humans experience anxiety. And so these are just 3 ways that I like to use to combat anxiety as a Christian. And I really like to use them in conjunction because I feel like you need all 3 of them at the end of the day to really fight those intrusive and anxiety provoking thoughts. So that's really it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.